Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding and Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. My guest today is Jody D'Agostini. Jody is a financial strategist and a certified divorce financial analyst who empowers clients to make clear, confident decisions during divorce. As CEO of Community in Crisis, he's also a champion for addiction recovery and a recipient of multiple leadership awards. Welcome, Jody D'Agostini. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
By finding out a little bit about you and your background in financial planning, and what led you into this field in the first place, and how do you see the importance of it?
So I started in healthcare. I was actually a physician's assistant in my first life, and I was in a helping career then. But I made a career transition. Probably this is where I feel like this career found me versus me finding it. I have been now doing this for 18 years as a certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst. And I believe it's a big helping career because if people understand their finances, they feel a lot more peaceful in life. They've done studies around that. And it's been my goal, especially to empower women to move in that direction, had really not embraced the finances in the family, to make sure they understood where things are and help them make informed decisions. So I've now been working at Falcon Financial Group in Morristown since 2006. And I came to the divorce area really kind of quickly. I mean, I thought that I was going to really be working with physicians and medical personnel, which I do. But frankly, what I found is women were coming to me to invest their money post-divorce. And then I started looking at things and read their marital settlement agreement and realized, geez, I wish I'd been involved on the planning aspect of this. I might have encouraged them to make other decisions or showed them why these decisions might be better for them for their long-term goals. Literally, I had one where I met her at her house to pick up $1 million check to invest for her. And she was crying in tears in her kitchen because she had to be out of the marital home within a week and no plan for where she was going and no understanding of what she could afford. I had another woman that had a special needs child, kept the marital home. This child had special needs, but also had, many physical needs as well. So she really couldn't maintain a job, only the time he was at school, which he missed a lot of because he had these physical problems going on. And of course, keeping the home was probably the worst decision she could have made because she gave up other assets that she really needed for liquidity and to maintain her life. So I started looking and piecing this all together. And I said, wait a minute, there's something here. And so I went and realized there was actually a degree that was sort of newly established back then in 2007. So I was one of the first people to get the degree as a certified divorce financial analyst to help people do the financial planning around a really emotional, time in their lives. And so I've been doing it ever since. And I would say largely, probably 80% of my clients are women, but, I have men clients as well.
So you said so much in that little introduction to what happened in terms of what happens for so many people. So let's dig into that a little bit. So the first thing that you said is about how studies show that people who feel like they have a plan for their finances are less stressed, something like that, right? And so one of the things, Jody, that I think is true is that money means so much in our culture besides just a way to pay the bills. And so I'm curious about if you agree with that and, how you see that from the role of financial planning.
Definitely agree with that. It's power, it's control. It can beget behavior. People stay in marriages because they're afraid of getting out. And I think money being a large piece of it. I think a huge fear I get is, and I don't care what price point this is, I'm going to end up in the backseat of a car. I'm going to be a bag lady somewhere. And I think that's where weaving in the financial planning into it is so important because I actually use financial planning software that kind of shows you, okay, if this is where you are now and these are the decisions you're making, what's it look like in the future towards your retirement, to educating your kids, buying a home, buying what kind of home, What type of lifestyle can you afford going forward? And then the plan becomes kind of a playbook, but also gives this, oh, okay, I'm not going to be destitute, later on. I'm going to have enough resources as long as I sort of maintain the plan as I've set it up and revisit it. It's so important. If I go off a little bit, I think divorce is very right brain oriented. I was a biology major. So look at this. During this process, your right brain is flaring and you cannot make analytical decisions, but you have to make decisions that can affect you maybe for your lifetime, depending upon what time of life you're getting divorced. And I'm seeing divorces later and later in life happening. So that's even more imperative. So I think having this kind of more data-driven decision to say, okay, this is what it's going to look like, and giving them different ideas through the planning to show you this. If you make this decision, this is what it looks like. Your cash flow is this. Your inheritance is this. Your ability to retire is at this age versus this age. It's so important to helping drive decisions along with working with the attorneys. I mean, because I call it the team, team, you fill in the blank, team Catherine or team Susan or whoever it is. And we get together and embrace the person to make sure that they make, the best decisions or informed decisions anyway.
So let's go back to the right brain, left brain thing. Right brain meaning it's emotional, it's what's affecting you as opposed to left brain being more analytical and sort of numbers driven. And when you say that the right brain is flaring, I think what you mean is this is a really emotional time. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, there's shame maybe, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And there could also be freedom, like, excitement, like it's such a confusing emotional cocktail. And it's really disorienting. And so another thing though that you said before was that you wished sometimes when you get this agreement and you're like, this is the deal, it's done, it's signed, it's signed. Like you'd been like, okay, I wish you'd have called me 6 months ago when you were negotiating this deal. And I think that what you mean is it's really hard to know if a deal is a good deal or a bad deal just in a vacuum, because what's a good deal for one person is not a good deal for somebody else, because it depends a lot on what their goals are, what's really important to them. And I think, in fact, I'm writing a book about this, like a lot of the information about what's important to them is in that right brain. It's in that right, it's in there. All that information could be extracted from all that emotional stuff, because that's what that's what covers what's really meaningful for this Susan, that Catherine, the other Judy, Tom, Dick, and Harry, whatever. Each person has their own priorities. And that's what you're saying is you're trying to align the priorities of the client. The whole team is trying to do that with what's possible given that left brain analytic approach. Is that right, Jody D'Agostini?
100%. We are on the same page. I practice holistic financial planning. So all of that is getting to know the client, understand where they are right now, understand their backstory. Because one of the things that you find out is it's not only their divorce, but maybe they're divorcing because they've got a child that's addicted, or they've got a husband with an alcohol problem. So there's worries about what to do to contain all those and control those as best as possible. Or they've got aging parents or some other stressors in their lives that they're not necessarily immediately sharing. That's part of my job to try to extricate that during this and say, okay, how can we plan and, make sure we limit the exposure on any of those other things that are going on. So when they're devising this plan going forward, that it's going to be, their plan and meet their lives and evolve as their life evolves. But it's really based off of their value system, what's important to them. And this is one of the things I say, they're going through, I call it the Greek chorus. Everybody's in their ear. Everybody's got a million friends that went through a divorce and everybody knows stuff and they're giving them all this information. It's information overload. And so then there's always this feeling, did I get everything I could get? Do I have everything I could get? I said, well, can we put that aside? Can I show you if you have what you need? Can we make that work? If you're going to go through a terrible process and come out of this, your family so harmed, you so harmed, and you're going to get to the same place, but you've had this emotional baggage and maybe spent way too much money on fees that you don't need to pay, worrying about whether you're getting the last dime. Let's just see what you need first. and see if we can get those needs met through the system that's already in place, around this. Again, working with the attorney, what can actually happen in the context of the law, because all these people don't know your situation. They know what happened with them, and then they're reporting things, and then people fixate on those. Once you create that expectation of that's what I'm going to get, it's like anything less is not good enough. So I try to help them kind of reframe, if you will, to be saying, okay, maybe if we get what we need, if it checks all your goals to what you were just saying, are we okay? Can this plan work for you?
You're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Jody D'Agostini about financial planning and divorce and the importance, Jody, of really tailoring the plan in the divorce process itself so that you're set up for success instead of set up for failure, whatever your lawyer tells you is a good deal or not, right? And, you've been working for a long time in this field, I think over 15 years, you said.
Yes.
Can you tell us about some of the unique financial challenges you've seen with people in high conflict divorces and how you help approach these situations?
Well, I think high conflict, obviously, whether it came into the process that way or becomes that way during the process, because I think sometimes, I guess maybe because I was in medicine before, I'm always acutely aware of the mental health challenges that may be going on during a situation such as this, and, kind of trying to evaluate, okay, what might be going on extra on this. And so there have been 2 or 3 individuals where I say, listen, they'll call me and they're so upset that before we even talk, I'm saying, can I get you, do you have somebody, a therapist right now? Can I get you somebody to help you going forward? So at least they can get, take those and become the best version of themselves as they're going through a difficult process. And, I try to figure out what kind of support systems they have in place, family, friends, and things like that, church, if they, if it's important to them, how they can bolster themselves to get through a very painful situation. There's a lot of things that are paramount that you want when you're coming through this, that you want to make sure that you're checking the box from, not the least of which is, am I going to be okay? And I know that's first and foremost for everybody. They're asking me that all the time. Even post-divorce, we're asking that. So the planning process, I think, is important and should be kind of married with it, because I think before they sign the great agreements that you all write up as attorneys, if they can see that actually works for them, then we can work in concert with one another to make sure that they get that, I guess what we call the best version of it. And it doesn't mean that you're getting everything that you went in or that the Greek course is assuring you that you're going to get. It means it's something that works for you and for your life.
I think that there are some monetary parts of divorce, obviously, and then there are some not monetary things, right? There are things that you might get or not get that have nothing to do with money. Time, say, with the children, or flexibility. Or, the ability to attend with the children a particular family event that always happens on Memorial Day, whatever it is, right? There are elements of post-divorce communication with your ex-spouse, which could be really important when you're co-parenting your children. There are a lot of pieces to the divorce that have nothing to do with money. And so as I'm listening to you, Jody D'Agostini, I'm thinking, there are some financial elements that each person needs, if it's possible, in order just to meet the basic expenses of life, in order to be okay financially. And I'm making that really specific. Then beyond, maybe you could get an extra $1,000, $500,000, $1 million, or whatever. But maybe you might exchange some of that for something non-monetary that it also has value and meaning to you, right?
Yes.
And sometimes I'll say to people, "Hey, let's talk about the price of freedom. How much is it going to cost to get this done now?" Right? If you could, and have them like pay $5 and be done now versus doing this for another year. Is that worth it to you? Like, there are things like that you can actually put a value, right? And so that you can compare the apples to oranges in that. And I think what you're saying is, so long as you're okay, now you've got some work to play with some other monetary things, but versus some non-monetary things that might actually make this a better deal for you. Is that right?
100%. I'm very future focused. So I try to reframe them and say, listen, there were bad elements, even if they didn't admit it at the time, they kind of realize it through the process. something wasn't working in their marriage. Can we envision a better future? And what might that future look like? So I get back, what did you always want to do? Where did you always want to live? Challenges are opportunities. It's a new time to reframe and redo and, re-up yourself. One of the biggest things is, I call it human capital, your ability to earn an income. And a lot of women have not taken that route because we're caregivers, we're taking care of parents, we're taking care of children, and sometimes we've sublimated that aspect of life. I find that maybe some people took time off from their career and they're raising the children. So then they're a little bit fearful of getting and re-entering the job market. I'm like, well, where do you want to go? Let's talk about that. Maybe we can educate you to get there. Maybe you can try something you've always wanted to do. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we're reframing from I'm stuck in this horrible marriage to, I always wanted to go into interior decorating. Maybe I take some courses in there and start working with a furniture store. We start to strategize what that might look like and make sure that the price point matches the lifestyle they desire. So sometimes you're going out to just get a job to fill in and plug a hole. Okay, I need another $40,000. We can find that, working at a doctor's office. But really, at the end of the day, you envision a life that looks like this. Well, how do we get there? And part of that is maybe upping the education or taking on something, an extra course at a community college or something like that to refine or refresh your talents. All of a sudden, many things are possible. That's what warms my heart. Talked to a client last week who literally, kind of kicked to the curb, husband had a girlfriend, all this stuff, and she was just beside herself. And we started to talk about, well, what were you doing? What did you do before? Well, I was into marketing. Oh, fast forward, she's now working $175,000 a year. I mean, we're talking about 5 years later. She is so proud of herself. She has changed her life. And she was originally kind of framing to, again, plug that $40,000 gap of what she needed to make the budget work into something that's making it's life-changing for her. And she knows it. And she's done it on her own. I mean, those are the kind of things that I like to encourage people. Maybe get out a little bit of your comfort zone and envision what you want to happen. I'm a big believer in what you visualize will happen. I tell my kids this all the time, both plus or minus. You want to envision a life of this, that's what you're going to work towards and you're going to achieve. You want to envision and be fearful of a life like this, that's also going to happen. So choose and overcome your mindset when it's challenging you to do otherwise to the life you want. And then you'll work with all your resources to get there.
Yeah, because I think what you're talking about with that client is that job is so much more than money, right? It's not just that she
everything.
She didn't have to pay for all kinds of things she couldn't pay for before, but this is a self-definition.
Yes.
And the wife reject, or I'm a marketing professional, right? Like it's so much. There's so much in that story. I really appreciate that, Jody.
Yes. I mean, these are the kind of things, which is why I feel like it's more of a calling than a profession at this point, because you really get to help people change their life for the better and maybe challenge them, because at the beginning it's a little hard because they don't see themselves in any kind of role other than mother and homemaker. And yet, a lot of these people have great talents, but they just forgot that they had those talents because they redefine themselves as something. So how do you become that person that you could be and get to that, whether it's even making a lot of money or getting a role in a nonprofit that all gives you great purpose and meaning? Those are things that can change your life.
Yeah, I hear this from clients all the time, particularly women. Well, I'm X years old. It could be 42, 62,
yes.
32.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter. It's their own feeling,
yes.
right? I'm this many years old. I've been out of the workforce 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever. And who's going to want me? What am I going to do? What would I even do? And I think that what you're talking about is finding something that really excites you, that you would want to do. Like, forget it. Like, maybe you were thinking, I'll go to medical school, but you didn't end up going to medical school. You worked as a physician's assistant, and then you get married, right? And then you're like, okay, so you're not going to do that again, but you're interested in both. What could you do? What could you learn about supplements? Could you become a chiropractor? Yeah, could you, like, many of the things that you could do that if you weren't telling yourself you couldn't do it, would really be something that excited you.
Absolutely. And I actually encourage them, and I have a whole list of career counselors. I want to make sure that they kind of reposition and get challenged to thinking about, listen, you have skill sets. And we said to them, I love music, but I'm tone deaf. Should I be working in music? No. So I can do that after 5 o'clock, right? And turn on my music. But I think you have to look at where your skill sets, your aptitudes, and your passion lies. And that may be where you should be going. And sometimes, something like this is the right time to start of reevaluating where you might want to go and changing your life in a good way.
You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Jody D'Agostini about financial planning and divorce, and so much else, actually, Jody. But if people are interested in learning more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, my name is Jody D'Agostini. I work with the Falcon Financial Group in Morristown, New Jersey. You can check us out on that. I also have a separate thing, Women-Owned Wealth, which I started with 4 other women in my office. We are dedicated and directed right to women business owners, RSAs, widows, and women on the move, as we call them. So we have resources and learning situations for women to educate themselves around finances and other things. And thank you very much for having me, Catherine. This has been fun.
Not done yet. I want to bring your attention back to a little bit more about the divorce and ask you about, as a non-lawyer,
yes,
working in the divorce field, what do you think the best role of the lawyer is? Is it important to have a lawyer? And how should people think about working with their lawyers so that they get this kind of bespoke approach that you've been you're talking about?
Many times clients try to engage me as a lawyer, and I keep saying, I'm not the lawyer. We all have to stay in our lane. So I said, like, the legal precedents, what the law is, you've got that umbrella out there. I can tell you what might be, but if the law doesn't allow it, then it doesn't work, right? So you have to have that as a fiduciary as well. You're there to help them and maybe negotiate a better settlement for them in areas of child support. Again, what are the guidelines for child support? Alimony, division of assets, understanding all of that in the context of what's possible. Like I said, you give me the numbers, I'll run them for you. But again, what's legal precedent out there? And that's part that I have to rely on the attorneys for. I don't want to be, a lot of times people want me to do it. I'm like, that's not my job. I stay in my lane and understand where I'm going from. There are other dates also. Once if somebody files for divorce, of course, there's a court calendar that has to be maintained and things that have to be procedurally turned in. Again, you need an attorney for that. It'd be very hard to do that if you represent yourself. And I think, again, as a team working for you, they can speak for you sometimes when it's awkward or difficult or if not impossible to speak with the other side. Sometimes these things get highly contentious and it's really impossible to have somebody speak for you. And that's what the attorneys are trained to do.
Do you have any advice for people thinking about how of divorce, mediation, negotiation, collaborative law? Do you have experience with those and
absolutely
advice for people thinking about it?
Yeah, I actually helped start the New Jersey Collaborative Law Group with a group back in 2007. Actually, it was, and I've worked in collaborative law. I'm a big believer in mediation. It seems like most of the divorces that I participate in now are mediated, because I think many of the attorneys that work in that area are more settlement minded too, and they want to, kind of negotiate and try to minimize cost and conflict through that process. So I'm a big believer in the areas of practicing law. I also tell my clients, try not to use the law as a weapon. I mean, you may be hurt, angry, upset, and you may have every right to be. And I hear stories that honestly, I can't go to sleep sometime. I'm a big swimmer, so I get the pool and I lap it out. But I hear that and I take on that pain. But I think you don't want to use the law as a weapon. You want to get through this process as unharmed as possible. Again, using all these tools that we've talked about over this podcast, and then let it go and try to work through therapy, praying, exercise, sleep, and all the things that make you heal during this and recover, because you need to be the best version of yourself going forward and live the best life. That's what makes you whole. Forgiveness is important. Get through this. You're not going to change your ex-spouse. That's why you're leaving them. Just move forward in a positive way and control what you can control, and that's yourself.
imagine that there are listeners thinking, what do you mean don't use the law as a weapon? How am I going to get any protection if I'm not going to use the law? So can you give us a little bit more of an explanation as to what you mean by that?
Again, it's like trying to look at what you think you could get and continue to come after somebody and use that process to try to get at them, because it can be pretty hurtful. What you're trying to get the disclosure you need to be able to understand what the assets are and where the income's coming from, understanding that, but don't use it punitively to try to get more paperwork, which I've seen sometimes that are really not getting you to the end game. I think it can get very cumbersome, the process itself. But, I see people spending a lot of time and money and on a process that I think could be reconciled a lot quicker if everybody just, again, showed up with their case information statement, and then we run the numbers, and then again, prioritize what's important, know what you need, and move forward from there.
Right. I have one more question for you.
Yes.
We're nearing the end of our time together. So when someone is finally divorced, they finally signed their agreement and they're trying to ensure their long-term financial success. What do you recommend that they do to make sure that that happens?
Okay, there's a lot of things. First of all, start with a plan. And that's what's your post-divorce budget? Does that budget first work for you? Get into a fixed situation, for example, home, that works for your new normal. Okay. What's the income going to be? Alimony, child support, Social Security, regular earned income, and plus or minus investment income. What is the income that you have? Does that match your living situation? So again, get into a living situation that works for you post-divorce. It may not be the marital home, but then you want to be able to have the financial freedom to do what's important, to reestablish the family unit, going on vacation, going out to eat. If you put everything and sunk it all into your home, that's not good. Again, then redefine your goals. Okay, I want to retire in 10 years. I'm coming away with this much in retirement planning. How do we get there? What's the savings component that I need to, how much do I need to dedicate of this towards that savings goal? You've got to redo all your beneficiaries and your will, your healthcare power of attorney, your durable power of attorney, all those things. And many times with women, it's redoing the investments themselves. You're coming away, maybe, your husband did the finances, maybe not. I don't, want to assume that, but let's say they were doing it. Let's see if those investments now suit what your goals are. Do we have to take on more risk, or do we have enough what we need? Then we can kind of tighten it up and say that's where we are. So taking on the amount and appropriate amount of investment risk that you need to achieve your goals is really important. So you can't just set it and forget it. That's what I got from my husband and we're going to let it be. No, it needs to be looked at and decided, where am I going from here? Biggest challenge in retirement is longevity. We don't know how long we're going to be here. So we got to make sure that nest egg is at the best place possible to ensure that you're taken care of for life.
That's great advice. Jody D'Agostini, it has been my absolute pleasure having you as a guest on Divorce Dialogues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.